Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. A very warm welcome to the ATA podcast, and once again we've got another fascinating guest. We're delighted to be joined by Will Foden and to share his story of transition from professional rugby union into what he's currently doing now. Now, Will, thank you very much for your time joining us today. I'm going to wind the clock back a little bit. We talked to a lot of athletes, both on the podcast, off the podcast, talking about the challenges, the mental challenges of overcoming injury and adversity. And that's often happening in their career, and it tends to have a higher frequency towards the back end, perhaps as they're aging a little bit. I just want you to shed a little bit of light on the injury that you sustained, because I think there's quite an inspirational story here, particularly in the fact that it was very early in your career. It's not something at the back end. And also the fact that it wasn't another player that actually inflicted this injury on you. So can you just kick things off by taking us back there and shedding a little bit of light on that experience?
Legend. Thank you very much, guys, for having me. And like I said, whatever wisdom I can offer with my story, I will do. Was at Hartbury College, went to Cinderford Rugby Club, played National 1. I played in between National 1 and Hartbury, getting a master's degree, and then back out to National 1. Signed my first contract for Doncaster Knights. I was previously in Gloucester Academy when I was at Hartbury. So my first pro rugby contract, which was full-time from Cinderford. And at that period, I was doing 3 other jobs, and I also owned an equestrian yard. So I had horses. I'm definitely by no means a horsey boy or built for horses, by the way, previous partner.
Right.
Long story short, I signed my first contract. And so we were living in our equine yard was in Hereford, Bromyard, and I moved to Donny, traveling in between basically. And then 8 weeks into my first contract, so I was 8 weeks into pre-season, I felt like I was flying. You know, it's like when you sign your first contract, you just that's what your life is. My ex-partner was lunging a horse, which means that if you look on a cowboy in Western film when they've got the rope around their nose and it's going around the person, she was doing that with a yearling, and it turned and started trampling her. So obviously, first instinct, I was there playing with my dogs and I hear her scream. I've ran into the school, got the horse off her, horse line whipped round but one of my legs, dragged me around the school. It was if you'd watched it, if someone had Instagram now and put it on You've Been Framed, it'd been hilarious at that point. But I pulled myself back up, and it was this weird moment of everything stopped, like life stopped. And I knew something was going to happen, so I'd let go of his head, and it's turned around and double barrel kicked me in the side of the knee. So I had a full ACL, PCL, and MCL separation, and I didn't even hit the floor. I didn't even feel pain. I just screamed. I just remember it was literally the impact of it, and I automatically knew that something was wrong. So I got out of the school with my leg like jelly. Long story short, I'd had, as I said, all my ligaments had blown out. And as I said, 8 weeks into my contract, I remember ringing Clive Griffiths at the time after I'd been to hospital, where I remember being sat on a gurney, and they were like, "Oh, we think you might be okay." And they lifted my foot and they just kept walking with it. So my foot was going nearly 90 degrees laterally to the side. So I was like full right angled knee. And I just remember ringing Griff and I was like, "Mate, I'm absolutely cooked here." And he was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, well, I've had an incident with a horse. I've had my leg snapped in half." And yeah, at that moment, I was very much in the depths of despair. I just thought I'd lost absolutely everything, not only my rugby career, but me as an identity. Because, you know, it's like as soon as athletes will associate this, you get into a position where there's 2 types of athletes. You've got genetic freaks, the ones that they seem to be able to just achieve everything, or the ones that grind their way to as high as they possibly can. That was me. I wasn't by anywhere near the most gifted rugby player, but I would out-violent most people, if that's even a term, or I was willing to suffer and dog it out. I was a back row.
Spoken like a true 7.
Yeah, it literally was a face like a jigsaw puzzle, and only a mum loves it. Yeah. At that point in my career, I just fought nearly 10 years. It was about 8 years in National 1, and obviously Hartbury, and then back to National 1 to nearly having my dream taken away from me. I was lucky enough.
And just jumping in that, Will, because it's a horrific story, and everybody listening probably think, why on earth have you taken him back to that spot? But I think it is inspirational because so many people talk about attributes of athletes, and you know you've been there and you're involved in things now which we'll come on to, which recognise those talents. But this is a tremendous tremendous test. As you said, you've ground for years and years to seek out an opportunity. You get that opportunity, you sign your first professional contract, and then in horrendous fashion sustain such a terrible injury. So naturally, this talks very much to the resilience of the athlete, elite athlete, and particularly your resilience. So tell us a little bit, because it wasn't the end. It could have been the end, couldn't it? It could have been the end from what you've described there. Just walk us through that, and I promise we're not going to keep taking you back into these traumatic places, but talk us through, there'll be a happy discussion in here as well.
Don't worry.
People can take inspiration from this.
8 weeks in at Donny, a load of gypsies let a load of horses onto the pitch, and no one had ever held a horse before. So they got me after I just had my operation to go and try and get it. So don't worry, I had to sort of look fear in the face. I was very, very lucky. I mean, fair kudos to Donny. They didn't have to keep me on that kind of thing. We look at obviously professional sport as it is a business. Firstly, even though it's got heart and I got along with everyone and all the other cool stuff, but layman's terms, cash is cash. My physio, Natasha Bedford, shout out to her, very much backed me. She said, "I'll guarantee you can get back." There's a long-winded, like, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. It's an oxymoron because it was the worst thing that happened to my rugby career. But for me personally, it set me on the journey where I am now, where if I didn't have that catalyst, I don't think I'd be in the same position. But anyway, I was told when I had the operation, I had 4 operations in the end. I had all my ligaments done at the same time, which was quite a new thing to do back then. And the other 2 boys that did it, but they did it playing rugby, didn't ever come back from the injury. I played cross keys away after 10 months. Wow. And I was back I was told I wasn't going to walk again properly. And I was told I was never going to do jiu-jitsu, which I've done for 7 years now. I was told, they have to say that because medically, if they told me I could sue them. But layman's terms, I came back from the ashes, so to speak. And I actually ended my career I finished rugby on my terms. It wasn't because of my knee. I'm fully, touch wood, I'm all good. But yeah, from like a resilience standpoint, at that point, I lost my house. Me and my ex-partner broke up. I lost all my money. I moved to Donny with literally just my dog and the clothes that I wore. It was a bit of we can talk around my previous relationship. I was in a toxic relationship. We just outgrew each other, and that was a catalyst for a lot of change. So yeah, if there's anything, I came out of that injury, I came out with my dog, full stop. Which was from a resilience standpoint. My current job, I currently work with business owners and leaders on how to develop more impact, freedom, and revenue without losing themselves or their performance in the process. It's very much human optimization, personal development, and sort of mental performance all in one to create a leadership performance program. I've always said that resilience is through exposure and through training it. I would never tell anybody to get kicked by a horse to get resilient. Trust me, it's not fun. But vice versa, for someone I can physically take myself to a lot of through harsh environments and harsh places, Ironman, ultra marathons. I've got another weird story about my lung collapsing in an Ironman and still finishing. I'm very mentally tough. But I now try and give it to other people, not just to be that weird David Goggins geezer who's like swearing on a television. Not at all. It's not. It's more. I'm fascinated by building tough people for sure.
No, and I think it's a powerful message, and the whole premise of this podcast, obviously, Will, is that we're trying to inspire people to step through the fear of transition, the fear of the next chapter. But underpinning that is resilience, and this theory that you've got there, we very much buy into. Obviously, we do a lot of coaching work as well, and that there's always opportunity in adversity. It sounds almost cliched, but you only really find those levels of resilience when you're being tested. And most athletes don't realize what a level they've already got because they are already being tested. They're in a physically competitive sport, if it's contact sports like rugby, or they're in high levels of scrutiny and pressure. They've got live TV, there's social media, all that analysis. So they're mentally tougher than they think. And actually, it's a skill that they can carry forward into business. And for those of us that are listening and going through difficult times, I think it's always powerful to take inspiration from other people. And I really appreciate your candor to say, well, relationship ended, told I wouldn't walk again, told I wouldn't pursue my passion, told I wouldn't be able to do the jiu-jitsu, pretty much went with the shirt on my back and my dog, and then have continued. And I promise now that's the gear change. We can now move out of that sort of period that was negative. We can talk about the positives, but just re-echoing your sentiment there, that there is always opportunity in it, and good for you that you built from that point. And actually, when you're in a dark time, nobody wants to be in a dark time, but you will learn something from it and you will get stronger as a consequence. And I know, Carl, you were probably just about to take your thunder there. You were about to come in, I'm sure, when Will was talking about catalysts and moving
Yeah.
into this next chapter.
Yeah, well, it's really cool. So a lot of the conversations James and I have with current athletes is all around dipping your toes in as many industries as you can, find the yeses and find the nos, what sort of excites you, inspires you to do something next. And you sort of touched upon that just prior to you signing your first contract with Doncaster, where you were doing several different things all at once. How important was that element of dipping into different industries whilst you were sort of working your way to Doncaster? Was that experience to finding what you wanted to do after your career with Doncaster?
I If you read my CV on paper, people look at me like, how the hell have you landed in the sort of leadership performance space? I taught gamekeeping at Hartbury. I worked in schools. I've worked in it was on television for one of the hardest schools in Barnsley. I've taught English, maths, dance, PE. I've worked on building sites. I worked in a very high spectrum autistic school, which is one down from a mental asylum. And I've done in that place, you can imagine things you think you ain't seen anything. That stuff was wild. More to the point of, I think we live in a day and age where most people are looking for self-actualization first. I've learned this. This is through like John Whitmore stuff. Is people are looking for passion, purpose, vision, and mission before they actually understand any form of exposure or experience in that thing. So they're looking to if to make them feel safe. For me personally, I have very much delved deep into what makes me tick, what my level of experience is in certain things that I know that I can give other people, and I've very much explored the inner landscape of what drives me, what my passions are, what motivates me, and been quite open and honest around effing about and finding out without me swearing. It's very much, I think, a lot of people are the people play it safe and they think they have to know everything right now. Well, especially in elite, it doesn't matter what age athlete, anywhere from the ages of 21 to 35. Your main focus, in my personal opinion, from someone who did a lot of things, is to be so hyper focused on your craft because you haven't got that forever, and accepting there will be a transition period in your career where you're allowed to be in the unknown. It's the same thing with going from semi-pro rugby, National One, going to play A League or going to play in Championship. The higher you climb, the thinner the air, the less people are up there, but also the more the detail matters. And that happens within your career, that happens within your personal performance, that happens with your standards that you set yourself. I feel like a lot of athletes are frightened of, now what do I do? And it's because what they don't do is they're looking for, as I said, passion, purpose, vision, and mission before going, do you know what? When I was training for rugby, I used to love the strength and conditioning and getting after it with my mates. Do you know what I'm going to go do? I'm going to go work in the gym for a bit. Or you work in the medical profession, like, actually, do you know what? I want to make some money. I'm good with people, and I don't want to just be sat at a desk on a call center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into different. I think what most people associate with is they're trying to find the perfect fit first. Where for me,
Hmm.
I am by far a talisman for those that I have done so many weird jobs, and half I've hated. Farming for me was like the biggest game changer for me. I'm originally from West London. I was like a little Ali G wannabe when I was a kid. Went nearly played professional tennis, didn't make it because I had a temper, and then pursued rugby. But I went from this like wide boy Ali G wannabe through to moving to Hartbury and turned into like full on country bumpkin because I just loved and that country bumpkin stuff's not. It's taught by a dude who's 100 million years old who's telling you what his great 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 granddad did. It's not like technical science. Like now I work in like human physiology and stuff, which is very different. My point being is that grounding there has shaped my whole career, and through it, my number one driver was rugby. Now afterwards, it's like that piece of that puzzle there was reflected on the pitch because I played the level that I did through work rate, determination, and violence, not from that much finesse, if I'm being honest. And I'm also 5'10 3/4, not 6'4". So I'm a sausage who's got a temper. So it's like, let's that exposure to new environments there is I think people need to go into things with curiosity. That's a big piece. Like you can always leave
Yeah.
rather than it being like, you know, that's it, I finished sport. Now I'm going to do, unless there's 1% of the sporting community that because they have, if anyone's watched the David Beckham documentary, it's an amazing psychology in relation to watching his transition as an athlete through to, obviously, we'll call him the sexiest man on the planet, lucky bugger, but more to the point of like, from a business standpoint, he is such a big part of it. Whereas most people haven't got that level of story. They are fighting for everything. They play championship. They play whatever, 100 games of whoever. Play for Bedford Blues, finish, and then it's like, now what am I? I haven't got this like celebrity career, but I also am not no longer a professional athlete. Now what do I do? It's actually going. Actually, that's a good thing. It means you've got choice, not doom and gloom. That's the end. You should definitely be laying yourself up, but you should also be giving yourself learning more about you.
Yeah.
That's what that is for sure.
I think in a very humorous way, Will, you've nailed a number of key points that we share with athletes repeatedly. One, they need to get clarity. There is no silver bullet. Very few people, as you say, can step out with that celebrity and say, "Well, I'm just going to do X. I'm going to go on the after dinner circuit because I've won, World Cups. I'm a British Lion, etc., etc." But also retaining the need for curiosity, because the two go hand in glove. With that curiosity and that willingness to ask questions, to go out and try things, to put yourself in uncomfortable areas, to start something and have the courage to say, this maybe isn't me, reverse out of that, try something else. All of those things help shape the clarity about what you want to do. And I love the analogy of Ali G to country bumpkin. I think that's a great soundbite. But you've been on a journey there, and then that shapes you into what you currently now do. So I know you've touched on it a couple of times in the interview, but just for absolute clarity for people listening. So tell us what, if you were to give us that sort of pitch now of this is who I am and what I do now, what is it that you do now from that journey to the present moment that you're in?
For me, I own a company called Built for Pressure. We're a leadership performance firm that works with business owners and leaders who want to create more impact, more freedom, and more revenue without sacrificing them or their performance in the process. That stems from human optimization, that stems from mental performance coaching, that stems from leadership consultancy. So I've been in a gym since I was 15. So and I've the S&C degree. I spent £100,000 on extracurricular education in the human performance space. I then had mental performance coaching through NLP. Through my personal journey, I actually had some done to me, which literally changed my life. Mine was absolutely. That's kind of where I got this from, as I suddenly separated my athlete identity to actually I'm Will Foden. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I was about to say I'm a wife. I'm not a wife. I'm a son. I'm an athlete. I'm a business owner. I'm a leader. I'm a friend. Rather than before it was who's Will Foden? I'm a rugby player. Whereas a lot of sports people would have that level of identity, and to shift that identity is it's all about, we talk about framing, and if anybody's looking into that kind of stuff, it's more of everyone sees their life through a movie, right? And they see through the movie that they've lived. Whereas if you can step away from that movie and realize that what's the actual reality, you have this, like, you have choice again, where if you're looking in and you're scared of who you are now and you're not sure, that's where I suddenly found that. And then I got a master's degree in coaching science, which is all about human behavior. And as soon as I did NLP, I went full human behavior, high performance culture. And the reason why we operate with business leaders primarily now, rather than, I used to work with professional athletes, professional fighters. Still got fighters on my books that are competing at SEA Games and going for the Olympics. I work with CEOs and executives who are leading $100 million companies. And it was all a bit all over the shop until I moved home. I went fully online, and then that's where we sort of rebranded again. And I sort of, as you say, I think performance is about layers. People think that you've, like that pitch that I gave you then, it sounds like I know exactly what I'm doing. I know it now, but if you do in the back, when I've written this down, I've written it down 400 times to make sure it comes off my tongue properly. It articulates well. It says exactly what I do simply, and also it means I've got options and choice within it. When if I'm selling or whatever, that's not I sat there, got off the toilet and got on my phone. Yeah, cool. That's my Instagram bio. Absolutely not. That's it takes a lot of effort, and it's the same with physical performance. Physical performance is an active process, and you either have an opportunity to build choice within your current performance, or let the current environments, insert wherever or however, affect your performance. I very much take ownership and take charge of me, and that's all I can control. So That's
No, I
what I
love
do.
it. And I think it's a really powerful summation of what you're doing. But I think it keeps underpinning, keeps coming back to this point that you don't get clarity instantly. So even that you've stepped through that journey, all those experiences play into you being a better coach, a better a better ability to engage with people and to build that empathy and rapport. And then once you've got into that space, there's still work to do. You don't instantly get that elevator pitch, if you will, of this is exactly what I do. It's a work in
Never done.
progress, which is the same for all the athletes listening. You're never fully going to say, I'm fully fit. I can't get any stronger, any fitter, any better. You're constantly working. But just, you mentioned when I moved back home. So just touch back there. So this is the chapter that you spent in Singapore. Tell us a little bit about that,
Yeah.
because again, that's a great example. Getting out your comfort zone, different environments, different cultures. So what took you into Singapore?
Finished with Donny, moved to Mighty Ionians, played my footy up there with the boys. It was wicked. I was an S&C coach at a high school in Hill House in Donny. So me and my ex-partner at Donny, me and her, we split, and that went Pete Tong. 8 months later, I found my now wife, by mistake, very much as she's found for Great Britain. She's got a great set of pull-ups on her. She was swimming around the world trying to go for the Rio Olympics. She's been to the Commonwealth World Championships and that kind of thing. I moved to Manly. She went for the Rio Olympics. Unfortunately, missed it by 0.1 of a second. So I went to Australia. Me and her both went there. That's kind of where we travelled. And I played for Manly. Came back, and I had this job in Donny. I just had this sort of. She signed for, it's the equivalent of the Barbarians for swimming. So Energy Standard, they'll pick you. You go away from all international duties and you go and swim around the world for a team for money or whatever. I just got to a point where it was like, this can't be my life. Like, I lived in Donny. I was earning okay money. I was earning okay money playing semi-pro. I've been in National One League for 12 years, I think. I've done 2 years with Donny and 12 years semi-pro. I played Gloucester a really short stint at Exeter Chiefs for a little bit for pre-season, and then I just kind of said, there's got to be more to my life to this. And a friend of mine, I was actually going to move back to Australia because I loved it out there. The football was incredible, but also the life. I literally worked on a builder's yard doing anything they told me to do. Finished work at 3, barbecue, gym, swim. The lifestyle was banging. And I literally, a friend of mine was in Singapore. I knew how much money he was making. And I've always had a work ethic, and I've always been attacking, but I've never, especially when you're going up in, especially if you don't come through regular channels of professional sport, i.e. you get picked up by an academy, you get looked after, everything is, you start on whatever, 18k, but then you sign your first contract 35 and you get a bonus, and did it where national championship rugby, average money. And it's not anyone's fault, it is what it is. But it's not, that's why I was PTing the whole, when I was playing pro, as I said, I've PT'd since I was 15. Even when I was playing pro rugby, I had a PT job. I worked at Vicky Chapman Physio, legend. I was doing whatever, 4 hours a night, 5 nights a week to support my money, because I didn't have I'd never been exposed to money. I don't come from a ghetto. Like, I come from Brentford, and my parents I wasn't from some like stereotype rags to riches. My mum was a drug addict, jobby. It was like, I'm from a loving family. I'm very lucky. They backed me in everything that I did. Shipped me off to Gloucester when I was 16. I left home. And I rang my friend Fraser, and he just said, I'll get you a job. Now, the guy that owned my gym was James Forrester, who was at Gloucester. He was at Gloucester when I was at Gloucester in the academy, but I also worked the front desk there. As soon as I talked to him, he's like, mate, I'll get you out in 6 weeks. I literally uplifted my life, everything, to move to another country. Now, it's just like subconsciously, it was because I knew that I had to change who I was. That sounds weird. It's not changed. Change identity means that I knew that I needed the next step in my career. I didn't know how to do it, and the way that to do it was to get away, because I was stuck in. I was good and great at rugby. I wasn't extraordinary at National One. I was, as I said, I was a 7, 8. You would put me on I was on the sheet every week, same position, 8 out of 10, violent, not getting picked up. I was never going to get picked up for anyone after that, or go any higher. My job, bottlenecked, earning not average. It was lovely place, average money, easy, boring. I was living in a bed sit at someone's house, and their house was just small and minging. And I looked at myself. I was like, mate, you got more than this. My wife's literally swimming to Barbados, going Barbados, doing a meet over there, ringing me up from the Energy Standard in Turkey with a 5-star whatever. And I was there, like, I need more than this. So moved to Singapore. I moved to Singapore literally slept on a boat's spare bed that had like an ant's nest in it and all sorts. He didn't know that the first night, legend. But very much went, do you know what? I'm going to go over there, and the skills that I had, I already worked, or I had always worked in the human performance, S&C, nutrition. I was like, I'm going to be a PT and operation. I got to make some money here. Within 3 months, I was a fully booked PT. Within a year, I was one of the top in the gym. Within 18 months, I was the top in the gym with another guy called Dylan. I went from being coach to business owner, even though I was basically self-employed. So I worked my own hours with all my own clients, did all my own stuff, but I was working for UFit. And that's kind of where this catalyst of understanding this sort of shift between I was just a rugby player to actually what does human and vocational performance really mean? And it flipped from I'm a business owner, I'm a brand. And like you were saying about evolutions of business, I started off as just Will Foden. I then went UFit senior personal trainer. Then I was F7 performance, Will Foden strength and nutrition. Then I was Station Collective, and now we're built for pressure. So just the evolutions in my vocation have all come from more personal development evolutions. I think that's something I'd love to get for athletes to realize is that your evolution is not linear. Like you have personal development, you have professional development, you then have more personal development because you got to find out more about what you want to, what most people want is they want like, this is what I do and I'll make all this money. Where actually I started off in a physiotherapy practice charging £18 an hour for, I was getting that after my clip. UFit, I was charging 250 an hour sing, so 140 quid an hour, fully booked, fully online PT business as well. I was working with some people who were worth $160 million. They just sold their company out for. So it went from being, yeah, a very different ball game, and it opened my eyes to what the real world was about. And this is where the leadership piece came in, because I soon realized that the mental performance thing was where you found your edge. It wasn't physical was easy. The mental bit, how you regulate yourself, how you deal with stress, how do you deal with pressure, all that stuff matters way more in real world performance, but it all stems from the foundation of the human. So I kind of that's where I found it.
Yeah, and I think it's a fabulous journey, and I'm just sitting enjoying, and I know people listening and are going to be enjoying this journey, because one of the things that comes through to Carl and I frequently, Will, is a desire to be entrepreneurial. So a lot of athletes talk about, I'd love to do something myself, I'd love to build something, but again, sometimes, not always, there's a bit of a deluded expectation that you can step out of playing into the finished article, ready-made business, and the money flows in, the reputation's built. And what you've just perfectly illustrated there is actually a series of steps, building upon building upon building. But you've gone and ultimately come back to now built for pressure. You are self-employed. So I think that's really exciting that people can hear the journey. Yes, there's hard work, but if you're willing to put the hard work in, you can create something. But
Yeah.
there's no barrier if you're willing to work hard. I think that's an important message to reinforce. And I'm extracting bits of your story because I know from the conversations we have offline with people, well, I want to do something, but how hard is it? And you've obviously done it. You've gone through those experiences. You've gone to Singapore. You've come back, and now you have your own business. That's correct. That assumption, is it built for pressures? Your business.
Yeah. So I'm fully, we're a limited company. Like I said, I built the Station Collective, which was just an athlete performance service, and then last year we rebranded and I was consulting with other companies and other sports teams, and I got flown. I go into a gym in Saudi Arabia last year, and I delivered to their management team, and I delivered to the whole gym floor. So I kind of like built for pressure was an evolution of that process. But like you said, it's very much a choice, and I think a lot of people associate entrepreneurialism as a failure, like working in someone else's business. Actually, I actually had a customer of mine who, when I worked in Singapore, he works for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. There's three of them at the top. He's one of them. This dude's this guy's wage is a telephone number, like mad. One of the nicest men I've ever. And I asked him this question because he's so intelligent. And I said to myself, like, why don't you just yourself? And he said, because that was never the mission when I started. It was when I was young. Is actually when I had two kids. I wanted to feel safe being somewhere where I could evolve, where I could personally evolve. That was the game, was to get in, learn, and then have choice. And then by the end of it, now he's coming to the end of his career. He's as I said, buying penthouse suites and wherever. Point being is wherever you're starting doesn't have to be the end. And what most athletes associate as entrepreneurialism. Entrepreneurialism is the hardest sport you'll play, way harder than physical sport. Like I said, I was number. I would tackle everything. Didn't care with my face or my teeth. I didn't give a monkey's. entrepreneurialism and building a business will hit you way harder because there's so much more pressure. I've got a young family. I've got a young boy who's 10 months. My wife works in my company, and the pressure of this is all on me. If
Mm.
I don't deliver, this I've got a house. I've got the same old pressures as everybody else. Vice versa. If you're in a company that has got you, you've got healthcare, you've got pension, you've got space, you've got development, you've got all this stuff. Yes, it's a trade-off, but if you are feeling unsafe leaving sport, you think that heading into literally shark-infested water of entrepreneurialism is the right direction. For some, it is. For some that are really thick-skinned, and like you said, my as a rugby player, work rate was my number one. So I to get to this point where I'm so, I'd like to think we call it equanimity, is the Buddhist term for calm and collected through challenge. I'm ready to get into it if I need to, or put the hammer down if I need to, but I'm also very aware. I don't think that entrepreneurialism is the right path for a lot of people who have not had it. We come back to that hardship thing. I've suffered physically multiple times and emotionally way more than most people would ever want to. There's not much things that could break me. It doesn't mean that I'm not vulnerable. I'm very vulnerable. I'm happy to say that I'm scared, but it was my choice to go that way. I
Mm.
don't think that every athlete, by far, success does not mean I own a business. Success to me, an absolute flex as any person, is for you to be earning the money that you want, living the life that you want on your own terms. Your own terms at the end of it. What's your terms? If you're working in a business and you're done at 9 to 5 and you finish on a Friday, you have your whole weekends with your family, you can travel 4 years, 4 times a year. How is that not successful?
Yeah, and that again, I'm like the stuck record feeding into your analogies here, Will. But that clarity piece that we spend a lot of time one on one with athletes, also clarity. What is success? It's a great question. What is success? And you talked about some of the hardships and pressures that come with the fact that it's all on you. That suits some people. Some people step forward and say, "Brilliant, bring it on. I want it all on me. I want the autonomy. I want control. I want to build my perfect work-life integration." Other people will shy away from that and say, "Hang on, I'm used to the structured environment of sport. Turn up here, train here, do this, do that. I
Yeah.
still want some structure." So I think it's important to highlight some of the stress and some of the pressures that come with it. However, I think it's fair then probably just for balance to go the other side and just ask you, how happy are you having fought through those challenges of building your own business? I'm not saying for any second that you're complacent or that you think you've arrived in the
No, no,
promised
no, for
land, but
sure. Yeah, yeah.
but now that you have a brand, you have your own business, you've got your wife working in there, the flip, the yin to the yang of, yes, it's challenging, but the level of fulfillment and the buzz and the reward you get, that just talk to that as well, because I think it's important to get that counter
Yeah,
side of
yeah.
the
No,
hard
I'm
work.
a. I think from when I got injured, I soon realized that it was all on me. Like I said, the other boys that had this done, there's two. They both did it they both dislocated their knee. That was a technical term playing rugby. Neither of them came back, and the mental side of things during that injury was the reason why I came back. When there's a point where I was strapped to a bed literally with belts, and I had to physically manipulate my knee, and I've never been in so much pain in my life. But if they didn't do that, I wouldn't be running, and if I wasn't running, I wasn't playing. So it was like I can suffer here. I like the fact that when no, I didn't like that pain, but what I meant by that was I liked it being on me because I had choice and I had ownership of everything inside of my world then. Whereas I was never really driven by the being coy about it. Rugby for me. The thing about team sports is based on opinion. An example, I made I finally got my break after my knee. The captain of my club was Mike Hills, legend, great player. But obviously I was against him, so it was me versus him. And I got my shot, and I'd never been in a professional environment before, so I just got my knee. I was about 8 games in, and I was like, right, finally, I've got my chance to make this rain. I'm starting here. Got man of the match, rugby paper, 9 out of 10, saved the game, blah blah blah, all this cool stuff. And in my head, I'm like Jack the lad. Walked back into the change room. I was like, I've fucking done this. Watch this. He's sat on the bench next week. Will Foden dropped, and I literally was like, I walked in and he booted the door down. What the effing hell's going on today? I was like, mate, I think we were against Pirates or someone. I think it was just against Pirates. We need a lineup option. You're a dwarf. You're a sausage. You ain't getting up in the lineup. Done. It really chose that was the way I think it happened for me. Was I didn't like the fact that I didn't have, even though I knew I'd played so well and that I'd got to where I got to, I was so unfulfilled then because it was out of my hands. Entrepreneurialism for me, it was probably a good analogy was I moved into a gym that was not Will Foden strength and conditioning. It was UFit, but they gave me the keys to my car and it was very much my responsibility. So I learned that actually through my responsibility, I can get paid more. And through my responsibility, I could develop X, Y, and Z. And through my own exploration and investment, I think, as I said, I've now currently spent over 150 grand English over extracurricular education. That's away from my degrees. That's from business mentorship. That's from mental performance. That's from every course under the sun about joint angles and strength and nutrition and mitochondria density, bioenergetics, these minor details. But it was my responsibility because that made me be able to charge more. That made me become the most, well, I was arguably one of the most well-known PTs in Singapore at that time when I was there for what I delivered. It wasn't by mistake, which I love that side of things for me is if you're willing to take the good and the bad and you're willing to explore your true capacity, entrepreneurialism is 100% the venture for you. But it comes with a huge amount of responsibility because when the tax man comes for you and you've been a weapon and forgot that you haven't, I've never done this. I've always been the opposite way around. But I know people that have done this who've got into the employment game thinking they're a clever one. They haven't been saving for their tax. So they've got whatever, 12 grand tax bill. And now they try, that's all on you, mate. Compared to if you're in it. So for me, I love that because I'm a control freak, being open. I love being able I'm the master of my own destiny, and I find that's the best way of expressing it. But that's my personal preference. And like you said, I think athletes have this. They spend way too much time on social media, way too much time on YouTube, telling me I can do whatever to earn money. Where I'm the opposite. I earn money from the amount of hard work that I've done, and I've built 2 companies to what I've done, not through magic, through years of investment.
Yeah.
And reinvestment and not going to, it's a stereotype things. Sportsmen will be like, oh, whatever. I'm giving up my parties and I'm giving up this and I'm giving up that. Do that with some education, which is talking about how to structure your marketing strategy or how to create more lead generation. Where that's not my passion. My passion is delivery. I want my clients to send it, but that's what feeds my business. So it's responsibility. I think athletes need to get that. But it all comes from exposure. Like you said, we've got such a big connection because everything that we talk about is exactly the same. We've gone through the plethora of what high performance means to be a business owner, to be an athlete, and also to be good at what you do. It's not from a finite piece of information that's a one size fits all thing because it's impossible to give it that way.
No, exactly. And I love listening to you, Will, because this will be giving people that energy to say, if I'm willing to step into that, if I'm willing to do the work, then I can get to that point and I get and elements of what you say will resonate with some, say, I'm up for that, I want to build my own thing. And it will also frighten some people and say, no, I don't like that. I want more structure. Now, there's something you've mentioned a few times during the course of this chat, and that's education, self-investment. And it's probably a nice bridge into a question we always like to ask. Naturally, the whole premise of what we're doing here is giving people an insight into the path that they want to walk along. You've been talking very articulately, very passionately about the journey from sport into what you now do. So for the benefit of people walking behind you, do's and don'ts. If you could pull out a couple of do's and don'ts, and I think sitting on the do side, there's certainly going to be the need to invest in yourself, your education, your own growth and development, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
You had someone saying, right, Will, let's talk a little bit about that journey. What would you say are some do's that people should be considering and some don'ts perhaps that they should be avoiding? What comes to mind with that question?
Wormhole. Absolute wormhole. I think from there's 2 sides of the coin. I can only speak from the paths that I've walked.
Of course.
So, but on my biggest thing is I would much rather say yes and realize that it's a no than not do it and then think, what if? That's a big one. I think I've the job titles, like I said, my CV is weird in relation to the different diversity of stuff that I've done. I think anything that's additive to your performance is going to help. So anything you're going to learn from is massively important. I think even if you think it's useless information, there'll be a time and a place where it actually matters. Or example, there's been I used to have an equine yard, not into horses. I know a lot about horses. I had a customer of mine who was massive into equestrian who paid me for 6 months worth of coaching, which is a big sum of money. The way that I got over the line was because I could talk about Pessoa and about how to do what using a menage, all this other jazz. Point being, if I hadn't have known that, I wouldn't have made the 3 grand. So the point from my side is that knowledge is power, but wisdom is you actually using it. And I think what a lot of athletes do personally is they either hoard information and never use it, or they are so blind that there's a bigger game to play and belligerent. They think that the world owes them something. They're just going to go and do it and try without having any form of active investment in being curious, like we said. So dues, anything that's investing in you, regardless, is always going to be a positive long term. Know what you value is a big one. There's Dr. John DeMartini's work. Did a lot of that stuff, which really helped me. Understanding that values aren't about like work rate and I don't know, whatever, resilience and integrity. Values are, what do you value? I value connection, I value exploration, and I value adventure. Those are what I so connection with people I work with, connection with my family, and connection with my process. Exploration is the art of mastery. You're never going to master mastery. It's impossible, but I love that because it means I evolve and I grow with it. And the adventure piece is, I can't stand being indoors all the time. I've got to be outside doing stuff. So I know that about me. I then know what jobs are going to work and what jobs aren't. Like, because I know if it hasn't got any form of connection or exploration, it's not going to push me. From a don't perspective, don't just follow trends is a big one. I think we live in a day and age where everyone's copying each other on Instagram and all this other jazz, and that's the biggest one is, don't compare your version 1 to someone's version 25. Like that. The amount of people that come I work with a lot of business owners. About 50% of them are, most of them in the finance industry, so they work in banks. They're like CEOs and executives, and it's more the mental leadership performance side of things. But coaches that do a lot of work with. And the biggest bottleneck I see is comparisons, people comparing each other. Like, why is my company not as big as X company? Because I've got the same values. You haven't earned the right to do it yet. That bit there, comparison is the killer of joy, is obviously is a cheesy cliche, but it's so true. Is the amount of people that I could look at, go, man, they're earning £1 million a year. Or you listen to Tony Robbins yesterday, 9 billion turnover on 138 companies. There's little old me in the Peak District sat here on the air. I'm there going, well, how come I could either let that bury me or actually go, do you know what? There is possibility. That mindset shift's huge. But yeah, investing in you is a big one, and just don't compare to other people. That's probably the blanket easiest one, I'd say.
Brilliant answers. That comparison one, Will, is so important. And again, people who listen to the podcast know that Carl and I are very heavily invested in the coaching space. I've got another business that's very much about coaching and working with leaders. And again, that cliche, you said it was in my mind as you were talking. Comparison is a thief of joy. And for those of us that have got children, they're all stepping into that world, and social media has just poured petrol on this fire for everybody, because we're all guilty of looking and comparing and just looking at the filtered version of life on social media. I don't want to go on a huge tangent, but we all know people put the top 1 or 2% of their life on social media, and then other people look at it as if that's the norm. And I think anybody who's listened to this chat, which I've loved with you today, there's a really important step there. Someone could just come in and look at what you're doing now and look at the business you have now and go, well, it's all right for Will. He's got this business and he's doing this, he's doing that. But actually, through your candor and through your openness to talk us through the journey, talk us through the challenges, talk us through where you were working nights and taking clients on alongside you, rugby contract, all of that has stepped to this point. Now, people can see that, they've listened to the interview, but if someone just comes in and goes, well, look at Will where he is now, that's the journey. And so that highlights for me such a fundamental point of why comparison is so flawed. Tony Robbins is a legend in this space, as you rightly say. He's been doing it since he was 17. I think he's nearly 70. So if we're all willing to put decades into any piece of craft, any walk of life, we will improve. Will we get to Tony Robbins level? Who knows? But that's decades down the track. So it's easy to go, well, it's all right for him. So I think, the do's and don'ts, and I love the do's about the willingness to invest in yourself, because one of the things we see a lot with athletes is, well, I haven't really got time. And again, it's not being disrespectful. You've got an abundance of time if you are a professional athlete.
Any athlete says that. How much computer games do they play? Most rugby players spend 4 hours on Call of Duty a day. That's
exactly.
A load of...
It's a nonsense, but you hear it a lot. So actually having you frame it and say, well, hang on, what courses can I do? It's not physically taxing. You're not going on the building site, but you have an ability to do an online course, to engage with a mentor, to engage with a coach, to develop a skill in an area that's in your toolkit for the future. So I think it's a message Carl and I hammer home, and you've given us a nice segue into doing it again. invest in yourself. You have got time, use it wisely, turn off Netflix, get off social media, and invest in some personal development, professional development that will make the transition easier. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
they were
Like,
fabulous answers, Will, to wrap that one up.
thank you. No, just the only reason why I got into this space was through inadequacy. I was a skinny white boy tennis player who was playing at Wasps, who was like, right, I'm going to be a professional rugby player. No one else believes me. Come on then. Moved to Hartbury, third team, captain the second year, and everything was geared to physical performance because I was never big enough, never strong enough. I was a fat kid. I was then a skinny kid. I needed to get fitter. It was all from inadequacy to try and meet the man to be the professional. It all came from I got an S&C degree, not because I wanted to be an S&C coach, because I wanted to get so strong and jacked that I could outbeat. Point being, that was my way of finding that 1%.
Yeah.
And as an athlete, you have a responsibility of. I have this analogy of like, because I work with quite a few men who've worked in the military, and you see people coming out of the military like, oh, but I don't know, I've blaming everybody, and I was like, you actively went into a war zone. You think you're going to come out okay? If you're trying to be an elite level athlete, and you think that you can't reinvest in your mind and your process as well as your physical being, it's like not getting an insurance policy to go on holiday. Like,
Yeah.
something may happen, and if it does happen, it'll be really bad. So that bit for me was an absolute game changer. And if anybody can take some wisdom from it, is like, you'll be an alien doing it, but when you finish rugby, I promise you, those ones that are taking the mick out of you will be the useless ones that are ringing you asking you for help. Guarantee.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, Will, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to you, Carl. I know you're scribbling away for us. I can see on camera there. There's some real gems as ever in this.
Yeah.
And is there anything from your perspective, Carl, that we should touch on with Will?
Yeah, there's just the usual question that sort of we pose to athletes, because a lot of the feedback that we get, and you've hit upon some of the key points that James and I often push, which is curiosity. What do you value? Because that's going to be really important when you start to shape what your future looks like. One of the things that we're very passionate about is when you finally take that leap into your next chapter, it can't just be a leap of, I have to go and do something.
No.
It needs to be something that aligns with you, that you're passionate about. And as we just talked about in terms of time, as an elite athlete, you have time to explore and find these answers. And often what gets fed back to us is, well, how do I replace the world that I'm in now in my next chapter? And we sort of flip that. And this sort of question came from a conversation with Sebastian de Chavez. And when he came out with this, he sort of blew my mind a little bit. And it was a real light bulb moment. And he said, completely out of the blue, well, who said your sporting chapter has to be your best? And as soon as he said it, it was like, oh, wow. That's huge, because the sporting world it's incredible. As outsiders looking in, we were all fortunate to have been in these environments. But as an outsider looking into a professional sport, you think this world is the bee's knees. It's the best thing you could ever possibly do. But actually, if you're looking at this world, that this is ever going to be the best it's going to be, Christ, the rest of your life's going to be rubbish. And
100%.
What are you excited for? What are you going to be doing to fulfill your time when you move on? And sort of one of the things we sort of ask our guests now is, you were a combative 7. You've said to yourself that basically you just went around violently smashing into things with your face, which most 7s do, to be honest.
Yeah.
And as a 10, I remember running for my life from you boys. So I clearly remember you boys chasing 10s down. But how have you sort of been able to reframe that narrative of professional sport and being incredible and exciting, and sort of changing that narrative and finding excitement and passion in what it is that you do now?
I had this. This is when I started NLP coaching. It stemmed from, there's a guy called Jake Ackler who was the head of S&C at Jersey. He was then the S&C coach for Max Verstappen for Red Bull, and he came for a talk in Singapore. And he talked about this sort of the mental the dialogue that was going through his head through his whole career. And he sorted this guy called Jay Headley at the coaching room. He's a legend. And I got a phone call with him, and I've never had a man. He didn't straight. I felt like I was naked. I could be clear, wasn't naked on the phone call or the Zoom, because that'd have been weird. But he literally, that exact question was, what if that was actually the wrong identity to have? i.e., why were you playing rugby in the first place? Which was, I was playing rugby because I was inadequate. I wanted to prove that I was worthy. I wanted to prove that I was good enough for other people to get recognition. I wanted status in a sport because it made me feel like I was beating them, where actually how was I winning me? And how I shaped that after rugby was understanding that there was always going to be a little monster inside me that needed feeding, i.e., my physical standards are very high, because if I don't physically feel in shape, if I'm not healthy, if I feel like a bag, if I look like a melted wheelie bin, I know that's going to have upstream effects on my mindset and my decision making. Vice versa. Right at the beginning, I was saying about actually who is Will Foden, and it used to be just a rugby player. That the biggest game changer for me personally to not destroy that identity, but to know that it's part of who I am rather than what I am, was exploring the reasons behind what I was doing. In everything you do, you're looking for balance. Right, wrong, good, bad, black, white, whatever. Angry, happy. Everything's got balance. And whenever you shift that balance, you're trying to recalibrate. And what happens when you are in a professional environment, you're in this high end of someone looking after you so you can deliver on one thing. When you finish sport, it's the opposite. You have a huge pendulum where no one's looking after me. I've got to look after myself. That balance is shifted so far that uncertainty and that level of who am I, what am I, and what am I doing, that gap there is a huge part of the game when it comes down to you'll see this in leadership performance spaces, the amount of leaders that have just got this huge stern mentality of fighting, anger, everything, because they're actually scared of getting found out. They're actually scared that they can't be vulnerable, because if they're vulnerable, they're deemed weak or that kind of rubbish. Rugby's the same. If they were in any sport, it's an active process to realize that you're more than just your sport, but your sport is you. And actually learning to balance that act is like you have to explore it and understand the meaning behind it. Not people, like you said, the issue with the word find your values is such a wushu. It's not, everyone looks at it. It's when you're in sport, you're like, shut up, man. My values, you know what my values are? I want to smash people on a rugby field, get melted and have a laugh. Back when we were playing, anyway, not anymore. It's
not
like,
now. Yeah, not now.
Now they're drinking, I don't know, spirulina juice post gym or whatever. But point being, they never see the other side of the coin. What's the positives of leaving sport rather than just the negatives? Like, there is a positive you leave in sport. You've now got choice. No one's determining your destiny. You no longer have to put your body through the mill, not on your terms. You don't have to play injured because you have to make money. You can now do a sport. Is it the same? It is not the same. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and the one thing I learned there was emotional regulation. Because before, I'd fight anyone. My second session, I got choked out. See you later. By a 57-kilo kid. And it taught me a lot. I love that now, because that for me is exploration. That allows me I'm allowed to be aggressive and violent, but in a controlled manner. I know how to use my monster, my beast that I know that I've still got, that's not leaving. But I've put that into something else. If someone was struggling with that, is try and find balance and write down the opposite. If whatever feeling you have, find the positive in that feeling, because that will help you alleviate that pressure of that conundrum of going from all in to absolutely all out. And that's the problem.
Fabulous. Love it, Will. It's been a pleasure, and there's some real words of wisdom. And if there's one thing that'll stay with me, no one wants to look like a melted wheelie bin. So that's the ultimate sort of takeaway for everybody. Yeah. For anybody listening around the world, wheelie bin, garbage can, wherever you are, just imagine a big melted block of plastic. That's the international translation. So well, listen, Will, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for sharing your journey. Thank you for being so candid in what the insights you've given us. If people want to connect with you, find you, where's the best place to do that, Will?
Best place, LinkedIn, just Will Foden, or Instagram, Will Foden, or if it's via email, info@willfoden.com. Any one of those, I'd love to connect with other people like-minded like us.
Fabulous. We wish you the very best of luck with it, and thanks again for your time.
Cheers,
Legend. Thank you very much, fellas.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insights, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.